first question I want to ask you is, do you believe there's something like a correct or proper way of using a prong collar?
So I think in most equipment there's going to be a better way to use it and a not so good way to use it. And so equipment in general, there may be actually one piece of equipment is not so good in general, but even if it's not so good in general, there still may be a better way to use it that's going to do the least amount of harm. So I would recommend, first of all, to ask the question why you may want to use something like a prong collar, because we tend to know they work on the removal of an aversive or something that's painful. And we also know there's many alternative ways where the dog can actually learn the same or similar behaviours where there's less aversive involved in the first place. So the dog can learn it through sort of lots of positive reinforcement, getting something that drives their behaviour that also results in a happier dog, as opposed to a dog who's doing it because they just want to get away from a scary or painful or aversive stimulus. So I think ideally you want to look at other ways of doing it. If you are going to use one of those tools, then maybe learning the most ethical way to use that tool.
Okay. How important do you believe is focusing on the dog's emotions while modifying his behavior?
So I think emotions are very real for the individual that we're working with, and if I can ask you, if I spoke to you and said, how do you feel, you may be able to sort of label or give me a verbal description of your feeling or your sort of how you feel in that moment. Now your label or what you're talking about in terms of I feel a little bit anxious may be slightly different to my use of the word anxious, but we can still use your description and say, okay, I feel anxious on a scale of 1 to 10, and this is what it looks like when I feel anxious. I can start to understand what anxious means for you. We can compare that to other people feeling anxious. There might be more of a scientific definition for anxious, and so we can talk about the same thing if we're using the same definition. I think those things are very real, but when it comes to studying the behavior of the learner in front of us, like the dog or even the human, I think sometimes we go, okay, the dog is feeling anxious, or I think the dog is feeling anxious, they're showing anxious behaviours, but I don't necessarily think we need to go into the anxiety to help the learner. What we need to do is ask the question, what environments promote that anxious behaviour, or what we're interpreting as the anxious feelings. So a child walked into a room and we see those anxious behaviours, or the child leaves the room and we see the dog look more relaxed or more happier. And so I think what we need to start doing is going, okay, what is it that is the environment that surrounds that anxious behaviour that we're seeing, or any kind of emotional behaviour that we're seeing, and then start to go, okay, so how can I teach the learner what to do to access other, how to change the environment around them, and that also then results in kind of a change in feeling, or the animal feels differently. So for me, that's how I kind of think about emotions and behaviour training. So if I see a dog, rather than going, what kind of the fear is causing the aggression, I don't think the fear is causing aggression. I think the fear is almost a descriptor, and if you look at Joe Lang's work, and is almost a descriptor of the contingency available in the environments, like the BC relation, what's going on in terms of behaviour and consequence. What I'm more interested in, not whether it's fear aggression or whether it's, I don't know, dog is frustrated. What I'm looking at is, okay, so what's the behaviour talking about? We're looking at the dog snaps or growls or bites, and what is it in the environment that's reinforcing that response. So when the dog growls, he changes his environment because we cross the road or the person moves away. And so the behaviour has a function in the environment where it creates more space. So what I can do is I can teach my dog there's many other behaviours, maybe things more that are whispers rather than shouting and screaming, such as the dog looking away or turning around or stopping or slowing down, and that has the same function in the environment. We cross the road or the person moves away. And then we can also teach the dog that behaviours, sniffing the other person or the person approaching, and the dog showing calm, relaxed body language equals lots of positive reinforcers, and the dog wants to go and sort of sniff and interact and look towards that person or whatever it is they're talking about. So that's how I kind of, in a very short discussion on thinking about emotions and behaviour, hopefully that just provides a little bit of insight.
It does, and I think it's a really important point. It's one of the biggest points that I got out from this course and the previous one, so I really wanted it to kind of get out there in the Polish world as well. Do you believe there is someone like a difficult client?
So I don't believe there is a difficult client, and often what we're talking about, because I don't really work on the animal, working on more the behaviour aspect, and so for me, are we talking about difficult behaviours or difficult clients? And so when we use the word difficult, what does that really mean? The construct of difficult, does it mean that I don't have a reinforcement history, or I don't have a behavioural repertoire to be able to understand or kind of solve the challenge or the little puzzle in front of me? So if the client's behaviour is a challenge or a puzzle, essentially when I label that client as difficult or the client's behaviour is difficult, what I'm saying is I'm finding that environment, the client's behaviour, difficult to understand, manage, modify, and so I don't think we should be blaming the client or placing that responsibility on the client. I think we should be saying, hold on a second, I need to take a step back and I need to learn how to manage environments and behaviour better, because a client's behaviour is behaviour that I can work on just like any behaviour of any other organism that we work with. So rather than labelling the client as difficult, I think we need to take a step back and go, I find that behaviour difficult. By difficult I mean maybe I don't have the behavioural repertoire, or that my environment, because I'm just as influenced by the principles of learning as my client is and their behaviour is, so maybe my environment doesn't promote the behaviour of what we label as understanding and sort of managing and that behaviour in that moment in time. So I need to look at how can I rearrange my environment better to help that client.
I love that, and I'm taking it with me, and I'm already implementing it in my work.
Fantastic.
So this kind of leads on to the next question. When working as a trainer or as a behaviorist consultant, when you work with a team dog person, do you believe that reinforcing the dog's behavior is as equally important as reinforcing the person's behavior?
Yeah, most definitely. So I think you've hit the nail on the head. Hello, Cody. We have a little guest. I definitely think because you're working with a partnership, and so you've got the animal's behaviour, and you've got two animals. You've got the human animal and the non-human animal. So and both of their behaviour needs to be reinforced and managed in terms of setting the correct environment, an antecedent environment and consequence environment. So we need to focus on both the human learner and the non-human learner. And we can't use different rules for the human and the non-human. So a lot of people say, well, with dogs, I use a lot of positive reinforcement, but humans should know better. So it's okay to punish them. I think that's a load of BS, to be polite, because I don't know if BS translates to Polish, but because what you're saying is, hold on a second, all the research that we have and all the work that we've understood and learned about behaviour is universal to every organism that behaves. So you can't just say because it's a human they should know better. No, because that human hasn't had a certain reinforcement history. I've had a different reinforcement history to maybe you, to our client, and if I look back and I go 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago, what was I doing with dogs? 15 years ago, I was using a choke chain. I was holding my knee out when my dog jumped up. I was stepping on their back feet. You could have labelled me as a cruel client or a stubborn person or whatever you wanted to label me as, but I was just the same person as the behaviourist or the consultant, just with a different level of experience or reinforced behaviour. So I think we have to focus on if we do believe in the science of behaviour change, we can't just be picking and choosing which organism we apply it to in terms of their behaviour. We need to be applying positive reinforcement and managing the environment to promote the behaviours that we want, rather than focusing on trial and error, focusing on trial and success for both our learners, the human and the non-human.
Okay, and the last question from this part. Do you believe that dogs are capable of experiencing emotions similar to us humans, like jealousy, guilt, love?
Well, I don't know what emotions, if I'm honest with you, our dogs really like. I can't 100% say, so my dog experiences this and this emotion. I believe dogs experience emotions. I believe the research that we've seen coming from neuroscience and the other things show that dogs have the sort of biological apparatus to be able to experience emotions. How that experience is it the same as you or me?
Yeah.
Is there a difference? I honestly don't know. And so that, and some people might be like, how can you say that? But I'm just being like, hold on, if I take a step back and go, factually, what do I know? I don't know. And so I work with my dog and live with my dog as if he does experience emotions. And but I always remember that actually I don't know how he is experiencing the emotions or what we describe as emotions. And I think that is actually really important, because sometimes what we do is we place our human perception on the non-human learner. And what we're doing is, rather than focusing on a good scientific model that shows works, that has really good results, and that can improve in lots of behaviour change, but also when we talk about behaviour, we're not just talking about external behaviour, public behaviour, we're talking about private events, thinking, feeling, all of those things as well. And so it's not just a black box. It's not, no one's talking about this black box idea. It's talking about the whole organism. And so for me, I want to work with my dog so that we're influencing behaviour, that I have a learner who's happy and relaxed and engaged, and I can perceive, I can say, well, my dog has these behaviours, I believe that they equal happy dog, and things like that. But that's what I'm trying to work and achieve. And so, but I think sometimes what we do is we go really fluffy and stick at that fluffy level, and we don't actually, we hold our animals back. We go, oh, he's a rescue, he's traumatized, he's this, he's that, and then we don't actually look at what behaviour do we have, what environments do we need to arrange to promote the behaviours that we want the learner to learn, that's going to improve their lives. And I think we actually hold a lot of dogs and animals that live under human care, especially companion animals, back, because we're going, oh, he's traumatised, he's got fear, he's got frustration, he's got this, rather than going, actually, these behaviours are a result of the environment. And yes, he probably feels these emotions and all those things, but actually, I can arrange the environment to change those feelings, to change his behaviour. And rather than get going really fluffy, let's see at the basic model, learn about behaviour science, learn about ABCs, and then work up from there. So I think we need to do that more for our learners, because I think it'll empower their lives. It gives them actually ability to experience more happiness and experience a better life living with us.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Cody, for joining in.